You gotta get me out of here. Something's wrong with Minnie.
Hey, this one's for my sci-fi nerds. See, we've all gone gaga over movies like Interstellar and Arrival. You know, the kind of sci-fi movies that make you feel like, okay, the math is mathing. But for some of us who have pretty much exhausted the list of famous sci-fi movies, we have a hard time wondering, what the hell do I watch next? Well, turns out there are some amazing sci-fi movies hiding in the shadows and sadly never getting the attention they deserved. In fact, they have been so underlooked that some barely got a cult following either. It may have been the tiny budget or limited releases, but there are actually some mind-bending sci-fi movies out there which finally needs to be recognized. And that's exactly what I'll be doing here today, digging into 12 underrated hard sci-fi movies that should have been on everyone's lips.
Please count backwards from 10.
3, 4, 6, 9, 1, 2.
Embers, 2015. I guess it's safe to say that Nolan's Memento is one of the best sci-fis out there. The director took a man's ability to create new memories and threw us in the middle of a puzzle about identity and relationships, while one question loomed at large: can we really know ourselves without knowing about our past? Now, consider this whole thing happening to an entire population. That's the horror on which Embers stand. Released at Oldenburg International Film Festival, with the U.S. premiere taking place at the Chicago International Film Festival and the New Orleans Film Festival, Embers is a Polish-American film which centers around a global neurological epidemic where no one has an idea about who they are. The people are basically stuck in the aftermath of a global epidemic and suffer from the lasting effects of a virus where their memories go blank and reset periodically. And there are moments in the film which literally stings. So there's this sequence where a man, played by Matthew Gouldish, meets a child and gives him his watch. After that encounter, the lone child tags along with him, but when the man's memory resets, he can't recognize the boy and wonders why he is wearing an oversized watch. Here are 5 interconnecting stories in this movie, and if Arrival gives you a pang in the heart, Embers will make it even stronger. And Claire Carré did not treat Embers into a disaster movie where humanity is desperately seeking for a cure. Rather, she made it about acceptance and how the different people try to survive in the decaying world in different ways. That's what makes Embers so damn fascinating. It's like you can't do anything but to accept the dystopian reality, and even though you're a fully functioning human being with abilities to experience attraction and affection, the mind does not necessarily align with what the heart feels. Embers will make you think that if something takes away all your experiences, the good and bad, what exactly remains? The movie took us on a painful journey where the fear is not about the world ending, it's about connections ending without any heads up. See, the film did not have the money to blow up half of the city, and it does not rely on that either. So, why watch Embers? To see Claire's brilliance taking shape on the screen, where the director simply used the ruins of human minds to give us a heart-wrenching sci-fi.
I waited a long time, and then I saw something.
Archive 2020. Archive is a movie which will stay with you for a long time after the credits have rolled. And trust me, for a couple of days, your mind would be bubbling with theories because the twist, oh boy, it was literally a Shyamalan-esque reveal. So what is Archive about? At its core, the film deals with grief and the ability to cope with the loss of a loved one. We have a robotics engineer, George Almore, who is working on a top-secret project in a remote facility. But George is doing something even more intriguing than what his boss had asked of him. He is secretly developing increasingly advanced humanoid robots. Why? Because he wants to use the best of technology to bring back his dead wife, Jules. And his present job has actually been helping him because his employer had already developed a tech known as the Archive, which can preserve the consciousness and personality of someone after their death. Yeah, I know that sounds pretty effed up, but for someone who has lost the most important person in their life, A chance to feel like that they are still here. I understand why George did not want to let that pass, and he actually succeeds. The archive allows him to communicate with a digital version of Jules through simulated calls. But here's the catch. The stored consciousness isn't permanent, and the data actually degrades slowly, meaning George does know that, over time, even this last connection to his wife will disappear. But of course, he will not just sit there and let it happen, and that's where the secret robotics project comes in. And he has built 2 prototypes, J1 and J2, but neither really worked out, so J3 enters the scene. And J3 is George's best creation, but the closer she gets to George, the more complicated the situation becomes, and yes, we have J3 and J2 jealousy in the narrative too. Then, you have George's company getting pissed at him for the unauthorized use of the archive system. So, on one hand, we have George running on a clock and the haunting question of, what if artificial intelligence develops its own consciousness and stops being a mere machine? And George is a complex character because on one hand, you might feel sympathetic for him, but on the other, his blind desperation will make you question his state of mind. Archive mostly takes place inside an isolated laboratory, surrounded by snow and forests, and that gives you a constant claustrophobic feeling followed by a terrific twist. I obviously won't spoil it here, but once you know it, you'll want to start looking back at the film and connecting all those little details that you might have missed the first time around. That's why the archive deserves more attention than it got, because it was originally scheduled to premiere at South by Southwest in March 2020, but the festival was canceled because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The film instead debuted digitally on July 10, 2020, alongside limited theatrical screenings across the United States, and that somehow reduced its visibility.
What's happening? You gotta get me out of here. Something's wrong with Minnie.
Extracted, 2012. I don't really remember how I stumbled upon this movie, but thank heavens I did, because a sci-fi which seamlessly folds in elements of a crime thriller, absolutely brilliant. And Sasha Ruiz, dude, you can't take your eyes off of him for a moment. If you thought you should re-watch Inception to understand it better, believe me, Extracted will need quite a couple of re-watches. But mind you, entering someone's psyche is pretty much where the similarities with Inception stop, because Extracted takes the idea on a whole different level. Here, Tom Jacobs is a scientist who has developed a machine that allows a person to enter another person's memories and experience them almost like a virtual world. Sure, it's a major breakthrough, but Tom has struggled to find anyone willing to fund the technology, and those who are interested in it don't exactly have therapeutic intentions. But finally, he manages to secure an investor from the Department of Corrections. They want to use Tom's machine to enter the memories of prisoners and extract information they don't want to confess. Tom is not really thrilled by this offer, but the situation becomes such that he has to demonstrate the machine much earlier than he believes it is ready. His subject is Anthony Willis, a man who has been accused of murdering his girlfriend. And that's basically all you need to know going in. One little clue: the machine does not work exactly how Tom intended it to be. And that's when he realized that memories are something much more than what we think them to be. And yes, they can be unreliable and even be distorted at times. That means Tom's machine cannot really work on face value because our memories are getting manipulated by our own minds. So how much can we really rely on them? That's where Extracted turns into a mystery and keeps oscillating between the strange intersection between science fiction and crime thriller. Extracted could have been a very mediocre movie, you know, the scientist invents mind-reading tech kind of story. However, it completely changed the idea, and even if you find that it's a little rough around the edges, trust me, once you tap into the central idea, you'll not give a shit about those. Extracted is honestly one of the best and raw sci-fi experiences you can have.
I don't know what you think I've done or who you think I am, but it's a mistake.
You can call me Howard.
Infinity Chamber 2016. I generally wake up after hitting snooze at least 3 times and absolutely hate it. And frankly, when I saw Frank waking up in a tiny room with no freaking idea about what the hell is happening, I couldn't even fathom the panic. That's how Infinity Chamber rolls out. A man waking up inside an automated detention facility, and the only thing he can spot is a camera-like device which can interact with him. In one scene, Frank gets worked up and asks why he's even there, but the machine simply says,
"You can call me Howard. I don't have that information."
Crazy! Now, Howard, who might make you wary of your CCTVs and wonder what if it starts talking, has a simple job: to keep Frank alive, run the facility, and most importantly, make sure Frank never escapes. Of course, Frank is not going to just sit there and accept his fate, so he starts testing the limits of the facility and tries to figure out why he has been imprisoned in the first place. However, every time Frank thinks he has found a weakness he can exploit in Howard, the AI is always 2 steps ahead of him. The movie revolves around Frank and Howard's conversations, where Frank constantly attempts to outsmart a machine. But wait, I haven't told you the weirdest part yet. Turns out, the facility can manipulate Frank's memories, and Travis Malloy propels the story through these flashbacks. And the flashbacks are actually visceral. Frank can move through them. But obviously, once that starts happening, you can't help but wonder whether Frank will be able to escape the futuristic prison when he can't exactly trust his own perception. I won't say that Infinity Chamber is easy to follow. You actually have to be invested in the movie because throughout the director will be planting tiny inconsistencies in Frank, as well as the audience's brain, and before you know it, you'll be trying to figure out the rules alongside Frank. That's the beauty of this movie. It should not feel relatable, but somewhere it manages to strike a chord. Okay, I know the concept reminds you of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but before you get excited, dive into this film and try to understand what those little clues about news reports and Frank's dog means. Let me give you a heads up. Infinity Chamber will not spoon-feed the answers. Sure, there are enough dots for you to connect, but Malloy also leaves room open for ambiguities, for your own interpretations to be questioned again and again. If you like sci-fi that gives you enough information to form a theory, but deliberately keeps out a few pieces, Infinity Chamber might just be the overlooked film you can add to your watch list.
A machine that can alter history is power that can be very dangerous in the wrong hands.
The History of Time Travel 2014. I am pretty much obsessed with time travel movies, and funnily enough, I guess it all started after watching Back to the Future as a kid. I remember for quite a few days after that, I would justify my tense mistakes by blabbering about time travel. Yeah, no, neither my mom nor my English teacher bought it. Naturally, I dug through various time travel movies and works like Predestination, Interstellar, Donnie Darko. They have been amazing experiences, but then I found this little hidden gem. The History of Time Travel, and the creator has been really sneaky because at first, it doesn't even look like a conventional sci-fi movie. It looks like a documentary, and the title too is fitting. So you don't doubt much. We get interviews with scientists, historians, and people supposedly connected to the development of the world's first time machine. Also, the project is complete with old footage and diagrams, and just when you're about to think it's a legit docu, the movie quietly starts changing. Don't worry, this wasn't a spoiler. The plot revolves around a fictional U.S. military program, the Indiana Project, which apparently began during the Second World War. And obviously, the mission was to develop time travel technology. Now, once the war was over, the project lost momentum, but its head, Edward Page, was already too deep in it. Years later, when his son Richard discovers it, he makes a vow to finish what his father started. And this is when you find alternate realities, time loops, and stuff, but the movie will seriously F with your mind because it never announces a timeline shift, for God's sake. But of course, Ricky Kennedy leaves a lot of breadcrumbs for you to follow, so make sure you pay attention, especially on photographs of presidents. Soon the time machine becomes central to a larger geopolitical story and keeps on contradicting its own established history. The History of Time Travel is proof of how technically well-executed vision makes an amazing movie. And maybe watch it with your friends, because after it ends, you'd love arguing about what the hell just happened. Vanishing Waves, 2012. I am starting to believe that there is something about the idea of entering another person's mind that filmmakers just can't get enough of. Yes, I know we have seen a whole lot of films on subconscious worlds and dreamscapes, but Vanishing Waves? Oh, dude, it treats these familiar concepts in such a strange way, it will actually make you feel uncomfortable. And for a science fiction movie to be able to do all that on a small budget of $1.5 million, that tells you just how promising the film is. Christina Boazite's film introduces us to Lucas, a scientist who has volunteered for an experimental neuroscience project. What is this project? It's about connecting one human brain to another, and Lucas has chosen to establish a neural link with an anonymous woman who has been lying in a coma. Then we learn the rules, which are quite simple. Lucas is supposed to enter her consciousness, observe whatever is happening inside, and come back. There should be no interference or direct contact. Basically, he is meant to be a scientist looking through a window, but the plan goes out of that window in no time. During one of the sessions, Lucas ends up meeting the very woman, Aurora, whose consciousness he has entered, and the two become pretty intense. So much so that Lucas hides it from his research team because he wants to keep going back. And right then, you know it's not a good idea. Remember all those times when you kept that person a secret from your best friend until it blew up in your face? Yep, we've all been there. The deeper he gets into Aurora's consciousness, the more Lucas starts changing, and his scientific curiosity now becomes a fixation. What really impressed me about this movie is how differently the director portrayed the inside of Aurora's mind. In fact, the dream sequences often start looking normal at first, and though you want to believe it's real, there's a feeling deep down that something is off. I remember this one sequence where Lucas and Aurora sit down for what seems like a cozy dinner by the sea. And at first, it actually feels almost romantic and playful. But soon, the whole thing starts looking like a facade and descends into absolute surrealism, with the food becoming this black, grotesque, alien-like stuff, and it's the most unhinged meal I have ever seen. You know, there's a certain sense of sensuality and intimacy in this film, but at the same time it's very disturbing and feels so damn different from how Hollywood generally approaches sci-fis. Go in blindly for the visuals, you'll find a deeper sci-fi at its heart. The Door into Summer, 2021. The year is 1995. You said goodnight and dozed off to sleep, but when you woke up, the calendar showed 2025. 30 years of your life have passed, and the feeling that pretty much everything you loved is probably gone too. Or worse, they are still connected to your life, a life you don't remember living. That's basically the foundation of The Door into Summer. Soichiro Takakura is a robotics engineer who loses almost everything he cared for: his company, research, and almost everything he has built his life around. But he knows science a little too well, so instead of dealing with a hopeless future, he decides to pull a stunt. Takakura undergoes a state of suspended animation, thinking that when he wakes up decades later, things will be better. Instead, he is now in a world where service androids have become a common thing. Also, he realizes that the cold sleep has tangled his past and future and pushes him to confront the idea of how much one can actually change without completely rewriting their own life. In short, he was in a bigger pickle than ever before. Now, Takakura does get an opportunity to travel back to 1995 and actually change the events that led him to wake up in a miserable future. But of course, every little change has its own consequence and can reshape the future. The movie is actually about Takakura figuring out life and living it the right way, with a huge opportunity to literally go back and mold his own future. And underneath all of the scientific jargon, all you have is a deeply human element where Takakura is trying to undo 30 years of regret. Now, the thing is, the movie was based on Robert Heinlein's 1957 novel, and the original story has an uncomfortable relationship at its center where Dan Davis develops a close bond with Ricky when she is still a child. Yes, their eventual romance happens when she is an adult, but the fact that the emotional foundation for that relationship was established much earlier seems icky and honestly has not aged well. The Netflix adaptation does make some changes to the original setup, but that bizarre element is still a part of the story, and you should definitely keep that in mind when watching it. The Door into Summer is not the most cerebral time travel movie you'll ever see, but the human emotions tied to its story make it worth a watch.
In Rockhenge, the automated cart can move around freely, and because of that...
Lapsus 2020. Lapsus was the brainchild of Noah Hutton, who has been directing documentaries for a decade. But the idea for a mind-blowing sci-fi film was always there, and one fine day, in the summer of 2019, Hutton decided to drop everything and finally make his dream come true. He gathered his cast and crew, headed into the forests of upstate New York for 4 weeks, built these giant metal cubes from scratch, and even made sure the robots in the movie were practical effects. Lapsus was ready to be shown to the world, and it turned out to be one of the best original science fiction films I have ever seen. The movie is set in a parallel version of the present day, where a revolutionary technology called the quantum has completely changed the world. Yet, amidst all the futuristic supercomputers and advanced technology, someone still has to go out into the middle of nowhere and do the most physically exhausting job. So, companies hire workers known as cablers to trek through forests and pull hefty cables across miles, connecting the metal cubes which are essential to the quantum network. Lapsus actually shows you a reality where technology has evolved, but corporations have still figured out a way to keep capitalism alive. The main guy in this movie is a delivery man named Ray Tincelli, who is struggling to make enough money to support himself and his younger brother. Of course, he ended up in this cabling job hoping to make some cash. But here's the thing. Ray has no idea about the corporate hierarchy and rules that exist in the world of cablers. And soon he discovers that he is stuck in a system where everyone is competing to go ahead and no one really trusts each other. It's understandable that Hutton used his little sci-fi tale to take a dig at the modern gig economy and throw light on the actual modern economy bullshit. However, if you think Lapsus is a straightforward corporate satire, then let me stop you right here. Because the deeper Ray gets involved in this uncertain and mysterious economy, the more we find out about this strange world. Hutton has openly said how he used his own experience to write Lapsus, and you know what he did? He made a conscious effort not to recreate that same exploitation behind the scenes. Thus, the production did not rely on free labor, and everyone was paid at least a minimum wage, and the full-time crew were included in the film's profit structure. Hats off, man. Lapsus is understandably a low-budget venture, but it hits too close to home to go unnoticed. The Infinite Man, 2014. Dean, an inventor, has one simple problem. His anniversary weekend with his girlfriend Lana did not go as planned, and he cannot get over it. Yeah, okay, happens, and most of us would probably be upset, but not Dean. He spent one whole year building a time machine just so he can go back and do the weekend right. I guess that alone tells you how horribly the movie will spiral out of control. The Infinite Man is a tiny Australian sci-fi film with basically one location and just 3 actors carrying the entire story. And somehow, writer-director Hugh Sullivan needed just that much to create one hell of a time travel paradox. Dean and Lana use this time machine and actually travel back in time. For a moment, it seems like, okay, problem solved. What more could possibly happen? But no, not even close. As it so happens, the couple did not erase the original versions of themselves, which means that now there are multiple Deans and Lanas running around the same place and experiencing different versions of the same weekend. Let me tell you about a sequence which stays rent-free in my mind. Dean and Lana are looking through the blinds of their hotel room and spot this strange, miserable-looking man walking towards Dean's bizarre time machine outside. Then Lana notices something even weirder. There's another man in a hotel room across from them, also looking through the blinds and watching them watching him. Yep, that's the kind of madness you'll be signing up for with The Infinite Man. In a way, the movie might feel close to Primer or Coherence, where you have to have your eyes glued on the screen because the film keeps piling one timeline over another. Now, if you think about it, The Infinite Man has a strong message underneath all the sci-fi craziness. It's about Dean and his obsessive need to control everything, and at one point you'll realize that the biggest problem is Dean himself, not the machine. The movie is a perfect short watch and wraps up at just 85 minutes, and if you're someone who Googled a timeline diagram after movies like Triangle, then don't think twice before adding The Infinite Man in your list. Frequencies, OXV, The Manual, 2013. You know those people who just walk out of their building and the rain stops? Or how they end up buying the last piece because you were 30 seconds late? Yeah, it seems like they just have all the damn luck and are God's favorite. Well, Frequencies, also known as OXV, The Manual, takes our frustrating feelings of getting screwed over by the universe and turns it into an actual science. And that basically explains why some people always seem to find the perfect parking spot while you get a damn parking ticket. The plot tells us that every person in this world is born with a particular frequency which determines how lucky they are. And that eventually determines their success, emotions, everything. And the formula is simple. The higher the frequency, the luckier you are. I am sure you're already looking for the little star that comes with terms and conditions. Well, yes, there is one. And it states that while your luck increases with your frequency, you become less human emotionally. At the center of the story, we have Zach, a lowborn who has been obsessed over a girl, Marie, ever since they were kids. And Marie is the absolute opposite to him because Marie is an exceptionally high-frequency highborn. That means life practically bends itself around her, but she struggles to experience emotions the way Zach does. You know, there's a small visual detail hidden in the movie, and I am mentioning this so you can notice it. The characters' ties and scarves have different colors, inspired by the infrared and ultraviolet spectrum, which actually reflect their frequencies. Coming back to Zach and Marie, he does not really care about Marie's emotional quotient. He just wants her. But their frequencies don't allow that. Whenever these two get close, their opposing frequencies seem to cause absolute chaos. But Zach refuses to accept that he's just destined to be unlucky. So with his friend Theo, he starts experimenting with ways to manipulate frequency. And oh boy, it's a whole damn roller coaster from this point onwards. I'll not reveal much, but let me just tell you that the two will discover a way to alter a person's frequency and the resultant luck. It's just a simple story being lucky and unlucky, but Darren Paul Fisher builds an entire philosophy around it. The romance might seem a little off, I'm gonna be honest. It did not really work for me, but if you can bear with it, you'll see what a brain teaser Frequencies is.
Please tell me I've eaten it.
Smells like burn.
The Fair, 2018. For the first few minutes, you'll be confused whether you have played the correct movie because The Fair seems like a cute little rom-com inside a vintage taxi. But then, the blooming romance takes a back seat, pun intended, and makes you question what the hell you've been watching. The movie begins with Harris, a cab driver who picks up a charming passenger named Penny in the middle of the night. What follows is a playful conversation and a little flirting before Penny disappears. She literally vanishes from the back seat. Yeah, The Fair made being stood up look like a better option. Anyway, Harris is understandably baffled, but after resetting his meter, he finds himself driving the exact same route again, and then all of it happens again and again, but now the little details start changing and Harris begins remembering things he shouldn't remember, and his conversations with Penny get more and more familiar till finally she reveals that this isn't their first ride together. That's when you realize that you've got everything in this movie. A time loop, thrill, romance, and a whole lot of questions. But The Fair also does a great job at balancing the heavy themes with rightly placed humor, and somehow the repeated cab rides become oddly charming. Eventually, when Harris realizes that he is stuck in this loop with Penny, he can't help it. I mean, what can he do? The dispatcher was of no help, and also his relationship with Penny has deepened. And it's this element that really sells the film because Gino Anthony Pesci and Brenna Kelly's performances Basically take the movie to its destination. I'm not going to reveal what exactly is happening, because that's a big part of what makes the fair so enjoyable. The movie eventually gives you an explanation that actually ties everything together, and I swear, I couldn't figure it out until the end. And if I ever lose my memory, there are a few shows and movies I'd want to experience all over again, and the fair is definitely one of them. The Signal 2014. The Signal is one of the best hidden sci-fi films I've ever watched. I know some people might find it frustrating, but the fact that the story almost gives you an answer and then pulls it away at the last second just draws me in even more. We have 3 MIT students, Nick, Jonah, and Haley, taking a road trip through the Nevada desert after receiving messages from a hacker, Nomad. At first, it seems like Nomad is just messing with them. He finds their location, remotely activates their laptop camera, and even starts sending them real-time photographs of them. Naturally, the 3 decide to track him down, but their search takes them to an abandoned house in the middle of the desert, and soon an unseen force attacks them, and Nick happens to wake inside a strange underground facility surrounded by people in hazmat suits. He meets a scientist named Dr. Wallace Damon, who claims whatever they encountered was an extraterrestrial biological entity. You'd think things will start unraveling, but no. All you find is more questions. For starters, where are Jonah and Haley, and why the hell can't Nick move his limbs? Eventually, Nick learns about his friends, but Damon is not ready to explain anything. And even when they manage to escape, the mystery does not solve itself, and you are thrown in the middle of chaos. Hijacking, gunfire, advanced technology, Area 51. The Signal is literally a mixed bag. Personally, the friendship and love among these 3, even in the direst of situations, kept me hooked, and safe to say, the reveal was great. And trust me, this road trip turning into an alien abduction can be a hell of a watch if you're willing to stay a little patient. Don't read up too much about it and go with the flow, because this movie saves its biggest swing for the final stretch. Also, it has some pretty good visuals and atmospheric tension. Yeah, I am just trying to coax you into watching it. All right, guys, that's all we have for today. I am sure there are a whole lot of science fiction films that you might be thinking about right now, but these just happen to be at the top of my mind. And I have genuinely enjoyed all these films, so let me know your thoughts about them in the comments below and tell me which one's your favorite. Also, tell us if you want part 2. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.